in the ICU. And that's certainly not going to help her kidneys if she's dehydrated with an acute pancreatitis episode. So in this case, the pancreatitis would win out over the kidney disease. But like I said, I would still be actually trying to manage them together if I can. Okay, so after you have identified nutritionally responsive diseases and you have prioritized them, next you want to look at those high priority diseases and think about how do the goals for nutrition of those two diseases, differ, or how are they similar? So are there things that are going to be in opposition, or can you really just manage them simultaneously pretty easily as long as you can find the right combo? So this, of course, is going to vary by the diseases you're dealing with, but I think a good example of this would be to look at, they are urinary stones. So dating myself a little bit back when these came out, around 15 years ago or so, maybe a little bit longer now, we had a multi-function type of stone diets. And so when the first came out, oxalate stone, which isn't really clear if you have to do a high level of magnesium. The Struvite stone also would like to have kind of a controlled protein level, and that's to help reduce the ammonia part of the stone. And calcium oxalate stones actually kind of like to have a little bit of a controlled protein level at the same time so that we can make the urine a little bit more powerful and reduce some of that acidity. So those two things actually kind of go hand in hand between the stones. Struvite stones want to have a controlled and slightly lower phosphorus content. Well, calcium oxalate stones want to have kind of a controlled calcium as well, and calcium and phosphorus we have to maintain proportionately together. So it kind of, again, goes hand in hand to have those ratios maybe that influence. Both stones want to have a dilute urine. Up at the top there, I kind of skipped over, the calcium oxalate stone wants to have a low oxalate content of the ingredients. Struvite stones don't care if you have a low oxalate content, so those are not in opposition. So as you go through those first kind of 4 boxes, really nothing opposes each other. They can certainly, go hand in hand if you have the right diet. Really, the only thing that is kind of in opposition between these two stones is going to be the pH. For Struvite stones, we want to try to acidify the urine a little bit. Calcium oxalate stones, we want to alkalize the urine a little bit. But if you're able to kind of have all these other principles going and you get a decent dilution of your urine, calcium oxalate stones, the pH of the diet actually isn't that impactful because you've got all these other things happening. And Struvite stones tend to care a little bit more about the pH, so we just kind of help those diets a little more for the Struvite, and they're able to work, quite effectively simultaneously. So this is a really great example of kind of taking 2 different diseases and thinking about what are the factors that each disease needs, and do those oppose each other, or are those kind of neutral with each other, or are they in agreement? So after you kind of look through that to know what are the components of your diet that you're kind of going to try to manipulate, you can try to pick a diet that's going to balance out all those nutritional priorities. Now, again, I don't expect you guys to on the top of your head know, what the protein value of a typical renal diet is, or what is the fat content of a typical low-fat diet, and all those different numbers. It's not, you don't need to have that memorized, because what I'd recommend doing is just going to your product guides. Those can actually be a really good tool to help you kind of know what your model diets would be. So, for example, if you have a patient that has chronic kidney disease with pancreatitis, then what you might want to do is kind of start off looking at your product guides for chronic kidney disease and get a feel for what the protein levels and the phosphorus levels are of those diets, as those are probably the 2 highest priority nutrients for us. So take a look and kind of write down what those are. And then you can go look at your low-fat diet diets in your product guides and see which ones most closely match your CKD diets. And you might find doing that, you're like, well, none of them are really that close. So sometimes we do have to get a little bit creative and start looking at maybe some other diets that aren't quite labeled necessarily for kidney disease. And that can be a little tedious for kind of looking through various things. But that's essentially what you're doing, is just kind of going through different diets and product guides. A lot of them have the tables now.
We've been
have
going
lots
all
of
night.
diets at once.
Sun's
So I
coming
find
up.
that really helpful. So you can try to find the best option to have that will kind of hit the lower fat and be helpful for the kidneys at the same time. And we'll have some examples in a case later in the lecture for that as well. So that's kind of the last step, is looking through, trying to find that diet that will kind of balance out everything that you're going to do for that particular patient. So now we're going to take those 4 steps and we're going to run through several cases to apply it and help you kind of see how you would do this on your own cases that come through. So the first one is going to be Nikki Grace. She is a 9-year-old Bay female Shih Tzu with a 2-year history of protein-losing nephropathy, and her UPC has kind of ranged between 6 to 3.1. She also has vascular hepatopathy on ultrasound, which is some real mild elevations in her enzymes, fasting hypertriglyceridemia at 850 milligrams per deciliter, and that is a nearly 5 per heart. She has a normal V1.2 creatinine alpha specific gravity, so she doesn't really look like she's in chronic kidney disease at this stage of things, and her kidney function overall is pretty good. She was tested for Cushing's and she is currently on Helmchart. So identifying her nutritionally responsive diseases, we can start off with kind of her problem list. We have protein-losing nephropathy, vacuolar hepatopathy, hypertriglyceridemia. So looking at these 3, I know that a protein-losing nephropathy, if we can do kind of a lower dietary protein level, that's going to get helpful to that disease process. So I'm going to put that as a high priority, and it's definitely a nutritionally responsive disease. The vacuolar hepatopathy, that's probably going to go lower on my list. There might be a few things we could do in terms of like high antioxidants, which could also be done via supplements, but diet's really going to have a pretty minor, insignificant role. So I'm going to kind of not worry so much about that one. But the hypertriglyceridemia, we do know that a low-fat diet is often going to be helpful for managing that disease as well. So out of these 3, I'd probably be focusing on my PLN and my hyperlipidemia. So we have those 2 diseases, and we need to prioritize them. Honestly, this one's a little hard because I feel like they're both pretty high priorities. The PLN, definitely we want to try to manage that the best we can with diet so that we can kind of protect those kidneys for as long as we can, reduce some of that protein loss. The high triglycerides, we do also want to manage that because they're pretty high. They're getting close to 900, and there's a lot of health issues that are going to arise from that. So want to try to prioritize that as well. Now, it may be that with a lower fat diet isn't always going to be effective enough to lower those triglycerides. Oftentimes these patients may also need a fenofibrate. So, we might be able to get by with some management there from a medical aspect, but also have to consider that we may have some underlying kidney disease going on too with that medication as well. So I find this one challenging. I really do care about both of these diseases, and I'm going to try quite hard to manage them both simultaneously. So step 3, identify the nutritional goals that are similar or different between the diseases. So for our protein-losing nephropathy, we want to have protein restriction, and that varies. I do it based on, what is their protein intake currently, when they're diagnosed, and things like that. But Nikki Grace is already eating a low protein diet. She's on royal cane and meal support
Nikki, let's stay in the shallow water.
So although she still has proteinuria on this diet, I generally don't go below those normal diet levels for proteinuria. I find if I go lower than that, then I'm going to be worried about maintaining albumin and overall just blood protein status. So we're kind of at the bottom of where we would go for protein restriction for her right now, if she's already on a renal diet. hypertriglyceridemia, we're going to be looking for low dietary fat. Her current diet has 45 grams of fat per 1,000 calories. So this is, although pretty average fat content, it's going to be a little on the higher end of an average fat diet. So it's definitely not low fat. And we certainly have a lot where we can move down on that fat content to see if it's going to be helpful with our weight. So choosing a diet that's going to kind of best manage 90 grays. So most of our therapeutic low-fat diets are going to have protein levels somewhere around 65 to 80 milligrams per 1,000 calories. So that's a pretty significant jump up from what she's eating right now. So I don't love that. I don't really want to do that. I'm afraid it might make her feel worse. But they do have low fat content of around 20 grams per 1,000 calories. So if you look at your product guides, you kind of get a feel for, well, I know 20 grams is a low fat diet. Like even if you're like starting at this from the very beginning, you're like, I have no idea what low fat diet is for a dog. Well, 20 grams per 1,000 calories, you can kind of go, but that must be pretty low because that's where our therapeutic diets are. So then you can go and look at some other options to see how close they are to that mark. So some of the ones that I found kind of looking through that would be good options, we have Hill's GD for geriatric diet, what the G is for. I use that diet quite a bit for early renal disease or when you have kidney disease that can need a little bit of fat restriction at the same time. It's not a real low fat diet, but it's pretty low. So I like that diet quite a bit. Also, again, there's some diets on here from just as an example that you can consider for the diseases that we're dealing with. So another one that can work is the canned royal canin hepatic. The dry version of this diet is actually quite a bit higher in fat, so would not want to use that. But the canned version is pretty modest. So both of those diets, whether the TV or the canned royal canin hepatic, it's going to have protein levels in the low to mid 40s, so not that far off from what we do, and fat content in the mid to upper 20s. So significant drop from what we're doing right now, and so I think that's enough to kind of make a significant difference. So good options there. Another option that I found preparing for this lecture is looking through some things with 99. It's one of the newer frozen diet companies. They have a urinary care chicken diet that also wouldn't be something I would necessarily go to right out of the gates if it's not labeled for something like CKD, it's not for stones, and it doesn't say it's low in fat. So you really do have to kind of look at the actual nutrient profiles sometimes to find a good diet for these cases that have multiple things happening. But this one has 43 grams of protein and 26.5 grams of fat per 1,000 calories. So another potential good option. All right, so moving on to another example, we have Luna. And Luna is a 7-year-old moving with short hair with a 2-year history of vomiting with Iowa stage 3 CKD, non-protein and non-hypertension. So Luna's GI symptoms have been well controlled on royal canin hydrolyzed protein HPA. Luna ate it regularly, and was quite happy with the diet, but we've now got this new diagnosis. So Luna has transitioned over to the royal canin support plus hydrolyzed protein dry. And perfect diet for taking food allergy at the same time. When Luma was transitioned over, the creatinine decreased from 2.3 to 1.8 milligrams per deciliter, so did pretty well on that. However, Luma did develop some constipation on the new diet, had kind of dry, firm stools. Luma was prescribed a quarter teaspoon of Miralax twice a day. That did help some with it, but still kind of struggling a little bit. What's probably more impactful is that Luma just doesn't love the new diet, and he has gradually lost about 0.3 pounds over the past 3 months. So while that doesn't sound like a ton of weight to lose, when we're thinking about an older cat, that kind of gradual weight loss over time is going to be significant. We want to kind of tone that down before it becomes, keeps going. So although the diet seems to be like great on paper and checks all the boxes, but we want to manage especially for diseases, Luma just doesn't want to eat it. So we need to try to think about what else we can do. So if we have our problem list of iris stage 2 CKD, a nutritionally responsive chronic neuropathy, constipation, and weight loss with reduced appetite, I think all of these diseases are going to be nutritionally responsive. Okay, so Luma's got a lot going on from a dietary standpoint, things that we're going to need to manage. So we do want to try to prioritize these diseases. So I kind of put them in this order. It's certainly could be put in different orders, and I'll walk through that. But my highest priority is going to be part of the chronic neuropathy. So above all, I don't want Luma to go back to having vomiting diarrhea. From a quality of life standpoint for the owners, that's really hard to deal with. And having dehydration from vomiting and not eating enough is really just going to make the symptoms worse. So above all, I'd say I want to eat something that's going to help keep that chronic neuropathy managed. But I do care about the kidney disease, and I would like to see Luma on a CKD diet, something that is at least kind of renal friendly, where we may have lower levels of protein and phosphorus. The hyporexia, I put that listed third, mostly because I'm hoping that when we find a diet that can, do something different in our neuropathy and our chronic kidney disease, maybe Luma will start to eat a little bit better. But ultimately, I do think hyporexia might be, or anorexia might be the highest priority of all of them, because ultimately, I would say we need to do something rather than nothing. But I'm also hoping that if we try a few new diets, the hyporexia is going to resolve. And kind of the same thing with the constipation. It's certainly something I'm kind of thinking about and trying to manage, but also hoping that if we change the diet things, constipation might resolve. Or if it doesn't resolve, we can probably do a few things to the diet to make it a little bit better from a constipation standpoint with any diet that we would choose. So looking at our different diseases, let's talk about the goals that are similar to different diseases. So with the chronic enteropathy, we're going to be looking at something that's novel or hydrolyzed, but the nutrient profile really isn't that important for chronic enteropathy, or it's of less importance. Certainly there's things I could tweak and make it ideal, but if I have other priorities, I'm not going to worry too much about that part, and I really just want to make sure that we're removing whatever that antigenic stimulation for the immune system is. So that'll be the main thing for that. Chronic kidney disease, we're looking for something that is moderate in protein and low in phosphorus. And chronic kidney disease doesn't really care if we're going to use a novel protein diet or a hydrolyzed protein diet. So they're not in opposition. They're just kind of neutral towards each other. Okay, so they don't necessarily need the same things, but they also are not opposing each other. For hyporexia, we don't have really a specific nutritional goal, other than just to find something we'll eat consistently. And then with constipation, we're often thinking about what is the right balance of fiber. Is more fiber, is less fiber, and moisture is always going to be helpful for constipated cats. But again, that's not necessarily going to be in opposition to any of the other things we have going on. And we can also manipulate the fiber on the back end of the diet we choose. So now that we've looked through the diseases that we care about, we've kind of considered what are the nutrients of concern for each of those diseases. I'm going to try to go through and pick a diet that might balance all those things out. So again, you might go back to a product guide and review what the typical nutrient values of protein and phosphorus are for our CKD diet. So you have that in the back of your mind as you start to look through product guides for our hypoallergenic diets. So once you kind of know those values, then you can go and look at, okay, what's everything I got that's like a novel protein or hydrolyzed protein that would be appropriate for Luma, and try to find those diets that are going to most closely align with a CKD diet. So after doing that, I found Royal Canin's Ultimate and HP dry diets have phosphorus and protein levels that are pretty similar to CKD diets. So both of those are going to be good options we can try. Also, Hill's ED and the ZD diets have kind of a moderate protein and phosphorus that are very appropriate for early stages of CKD. So those could be also some pretty good options for Luma. And ultimately, we might want to mix and match and give Luma a lot of different choices too. Sometimes that can also help with food intake. I find cats with chronic kidney disease do often need a lot of variety because they get tired of things quite rapidly. So maybe they can use all of these options in a rotation just to get Luma where he's kind of excited about food a little bit more or eat more consistently. Other things you can do is maybe you combine two diets that maybe aren't necessarily perfect on their own, but mixed together can meet some of our goals. So for example, we could take that lower protein and phosphorus content of, say, the Renal Plus HP or Ultimina or HP Dry, and we can combine that maybe with a canned product such as the Royal Canin PR Rabbit or PD Dot that are a little higher in protein and phosphorus, but maybe they would help with the palatability of it, and when combined together would still give us a pretty good nutrient profile for Luma overall, but might help them eat a little bit more consistently. So I do that quite often, where I might not have the perfect diet by itself, but if I were to kind of say, well, if I take this diet and that diet and put them together, well, then I get that protein level right now, or I get that content right where I want it to be, or phosphorus, whatever it is. So sometimes you can take two diets and combine them together to fit that profile. So that's another kind of tip that you can use as well. And then we had also kind of talked about the constipation. So constipation is one of those things that we can sometimes manage if we don't necessarily have the ability to use like a GI diet or something like that that's designed for constipation. We can also, maybe add a little Miralax, sometimes for cats that tend to get those hard stools from maybe a little dehydration. I find that can be helpful. You can also add a little bit of psyllium to this diet to help soften those stools and make them a little bit more moist. Sometimes pumpkin or zucchini can be helpful. I know it sounds kind of weird to feed a cat like zucchini, but there was actually a study that showed that cats will eat it, and it can be helpful. And those can both help increase our water intake along with some of our fiber intake. So, if you find the diet that Luna will eat readily, but we're still having issues with constipation, that's where I might add in some of these other things and try them out and see if we can manage the constipation that way. Right, so moving on to our next case, this is Jasper, and Jasper is an 8-year-old neutered male Jack Russell Terrier mix. And Jasper has a cutaneous adverse food reaction, and that was confirmed to be chicken when the neighbor fed him a little chicken. We kind of blew back up with the skin issues, so we do know that chicken is bad for Jasper. 2 weeks ago, Jasper had a pancreatitis episode. He also has hypothyroidism, which is currently well controlled, and he has a body condition score of 6-7. So Jasper's diet history, he was switched from a chicken-based meal to instant food dog food recipe, wet dog food, 6 months ago. And so, in a case where you're dealing with a dog that has developed pancreatitis, I think it's important to go back and look at ways of currently eating in terms of the fat content of his diet. And as a nutritionist, I always want to go back and see things. Don't hear me say that I would only do this for these cases. I'm going to do it for every case. But of particular importance for a case like Jasper. So if you were to look online at this diet, you can find the guaranteed analysis. And from there, you can estimate the fat content if they don't give it to you in a format that's easily available to kind of look at, what is my grams per 100 calories or grams per 1,000 calories. So if we want to estimate the fat content of this diet, you want to begin by looking at your calorie content. So APCO requires this to be on the label, so you should be able to find this either directly on the package or most companies will have it on their website. But if you find the calorie content on kcals per kilogram of the food, and you take that number and divide it by 10,000, or you can just take this and just move the decimal place over 4 spots. It's kind of a little shortcut method here. But we do that to get to this number here. And then you take your nutrient of interest. So in this case, it's fat, and fat's at 10%. So we take that 10% and we divide it by this number here, where it's been divided by 10,000. So your calorie density divided by 10,000. And when you do that, you get 62.2 grams of fat per 1,000 calories. Now that is still just a minimum amount of fat. So the fat in the actual product is going to be higher than that. Usually I just kind of throw on about a 10% fudge factor on there. So we're probably looking at closer to maybe something in the upper 60s to low 70s for the grams of fat per 1,000 calories. So that's a quite high fat diet. So it does make it a little hard to know how much fat do we really need to do for Jasper on restriction. If he was already eating a fairly low fat diet and got pancreatitis, that would tell me that, gosh, I probably want to go even lower and do like a really low fat diet. But with a patient that's on an already really high fat diet and gets pancreatitis, it's a little hard to know. He might be lower fat content. I also don't want to have a super high protein content for pancreatitis either. When we think about digestive enzymes, they're going to be stimulated out of the pancreas from both fat with those lipases, but also protein is going to stimulate some of those proteases in the pancreas. So although I don't necessarily need a low protein diet, I also don't want like a really, really high protein diet either. So I think that can also stimulate the pancreas a little too much. And then for our cutaneous adverse food reaction, we know that we primarily just want fish. So next up, we're going to move to a diet that's going to just balance all of those nutritional biomarkers. So there's actually quite a few options that we're probably working with all for Jasper. So, and actually there's more than but we do have a newer diet. So Hills has come out with a low fat and low fat HP. So all of these are going to be explored hydrolysis. So that's going to be pretty safe as far as removing that chicken. And they're all really well balanced. So these are all going to be good options for Jasper. Jasper is used to eating a really high fat, probably soon pretty tasty. So most not the abusive drivers would see really hard to know. But there's a clean version here of the ZD low fat, so it's another option. So if you will eat these diets, then those would be perfect options. We also have the Royal Canin Water and Calorie 2 gummies. So that's going to be a whitefish-based diet. Pretty moderate in fat. Again, I don't know how low I need to go for them, but this is a pretty significant reduction over what we do currently. Royal Canin vegetarian rye is similar. We could, it's kind of a moderately low fat diet that would probably be okay for him given these high fat diets to begin with that cause the pancreatitis. Frozen HA is another option. Blue Buffalo's canned version of their HF, so that's a salmon hydrolysate. That one could be a good choice. Note the dry version of that diet is not as low in fat as the canned version, but it does give us another option. The protein level is getting kind of on the high end. Probably okay, but it is getting a little bit high in terms of the pancreatitis potential. Rain is another company that has quite a few novel protein diets, and they have their low-fat kangaroo diets. These would not be available in California, but you should be able to get them in the other states. So these could also be good options to be novel proteins that are low in fat. The maintenance pate one here, that's getting a little high in protein for me. I probably wouldn't want to necessarily do that. But this could be also where you do a mix and match. Like if you were to take, let's just say, for example, the the Rain low fat kangaroo maintenance with this high protein level. If we took that and maybe we combined it with a Royal Canin vegetarian dry food, well, then our protein levels actually kind of back into a more moderate range. They're still pretty low in fat. So it may be that you do some mixing and matching. If perhaps he really, really loves this low fat kangaroo pate, but we're concerned about the protein, we just mix it with a dry food. Or we mix it with ziti low fat can to bring the protein down. So there's a lot of different ways that you could work this out to get to something that's going to be the best in terms of getting to eat it consistently and also hit those nutrient profile goals that we have. Okay, so now we're going to go through our last example. This is Duke. Duke is a 7-year-old neutered male Doberman Pinscher, and Duke has copper hepatopathy, diagnosed through biopsy with about 1,400 parts per million of copper, and he has a grade 4 central lobular to mid-zonal copper accumulation. And Duke also has a history of calcium oxalate urolithiasis. He has had multiple cystoliths and uroliths. He's had laser trypsin, and he has had acystotomy for removal. So he definitely wants to form these calcium oxalate stones pretty readily. So Duke is currently eating Hill's healthy dry diet, but he's reluctantly eating the diet. And he has lost about 10% of his body weight within the past 2 months. He's currently on Apoquel for atopic dermatitis and penicillin for 200 milligrams, 2 capsules every 12 hours. I often do see my patients with copper hepatopathies having a little bit of selective appetites. Some of that can be from the disease, some of that can be from the penicillin need. So it can sometimes be a struggle to keep these guys eating consistently. So we want to think about what are our nutritionally responsive diseases for him. So we have our copper-associated hepatopathy, we have calcium oxalate bladder stones, and atopic dermatitis. I would probably say that the copper hepatopathy and calcium oxalate are our 2 nutritionally responsive diseases. I probably would not worry too much about atopic dermatitis. I mean, we could help manage the atopic dermatitis with some fish oils, probably the primary way I would do that, or increase our EPA and DHA. But it's going to kind of be a little lower on that list, and we can always kind of throw those on to whatever diet we're working with, and just get the copper and calcium oxalate under control. So then if we want to kind of prioritize things, we have our calcium oxalate bladder stones. I've got that as the highest in this particular case. I certainly could go back and forth between that and copper. I think they're both important. But he has already had surgery and lithotripsy and multiple surgeries to remove calcium oxalate stones can certainly become an issue in a lot of different ways, financially, also just the dangers of repeated surgeries and all of those things. So because he is a repeat stone former, I do have that as a pretty high priority. But the copper hepatopathy is also going to be a high priority, and we do still have to kind of manage that hyporexia happening at the same time. So looking at our nutritional goals that are going to be similar or different between our diseases, our calcium oxalate stone, we're going to, as we kind of said in that slide back there with the cat, we've got kind of a low oxalate content between ingredients we choose. We want to keep a controlled protein level to help manage the pH of the urine. We want to keep a controlled calcium level so it's not too high, not too low. We want to have a relief burn, and we want to try to help him And then for the copper-associated hepatopathy, the main goal is really just a low dietary copper. There's certainly other things we might consider, like kind of high concentrations of vitamin D or zinc and things like that. But when we're trying to kind of do these comorbidities, sometimes we're just focusing on what are the major things that I need to manage with that diet. And for this one, we're going to just really be primarily focusing on that low dietary copper. So with that in mind, I kind of pulled together the diets that I'm aware of that have a low copper level to see what our choices are. So we can see that right now he's currently eating the Hills LD dry, and all of these diets are pretty controlled in their protein level. None of them are high protein. So from a calcium oxalate standpoint, all of these are fine. They vary quite a bit in the fat content. So this one on the end is just food for dogs and high support low copper. That is a fresh frozen diet, so it's going to cost quite a bit more than some of these others, but it might be helpful from a palatability standpoint. But this one is quite a bit lower in fat compared to most of the others. But the
Yeah.
This is kind of looking back from a couple of years, but I don't think they have formulated it differently from the last time it was published. So we have these copper levels in here. The Just Food for Dogs is a slightly higher copper, but still lower than what we expect in typical maintenance diet. From the standpoint of calcium oxalate stones, all of these are pretty modest in their calcium content. I wouldn't consider any of these to be high. And phosphorus, kind of the same thing. They're all pretty moderate in their phosphorus level. Now, looking through the pneumatic guides for RF stats, or kind of stone labeling for prevention of stones, the Hills LD diets do have that kind of stone preventative label on there. The Royal Canin diets don't, so I might prioritize these diets for that reason. Just Food for Dogs also does not have it, but they have not tested for it. Looking through kind of the nutrient composition of their diets, along with the fact that it is a moist, homemade type of food, I can't say for sure, but I would suspect it would be pretty friendly towards a calcium oxalate stone as well, because we're adding that moisture, and it is pretty controlled in the calcium, and the ingredients in it are like really high on slate ingredients either. So don't have the data on this one, but it likely would be pretty decent if we can use that. So right now we have been eating the LD dry. It's a great choice, other than we take. So what I would probably do for a case like this for Duke is I might see if we eat the canned product instead. He's a gentleman, a lot of cans of food. Maybe we eat the can combined with the dry. Like maybe we could do 1 or 2 cans a day mixed with dry. That would be enough to motivate him to eat a little bit better. So that might be the first thing I would do. If that's not enough, maybe I would do the Just Food for Dogs and mix that with the canned or dry LD. Partly because this one, to feed a gentleman, would be quite pricey. Some owners may not mind, but if that's a factor or an issue, it might be that you do some of this and combine it with one of these to kind of make it a little more enticing for him. If none of those things work, that would be where I would probably call board nutritionists and let us try doing some homemade diets and kind of doing what we can there to get him to eat consistently. But this is another case where it kind of shows you that you can kind of look through what are things that are labeled for stones on top of being labeled for the primary disease we're looking at, and also make sure that it's labeled So just to kind of sum it up and revisit our steps to help you with managing patients with comorbidities, we first want to try to identify those nutritionally responsive diseases in those patients that are a little bit of a train wreck, that have the laundry list of problems. I'm talking to all the internal medicine specialists out there that send me those cases that have 10 problem lists, but pull out the ones that are going to be most responsive to nutrition first, and then decide which ones do I really need to care about. There may be some where you're like, well, it'd be nice to manage that one with nutrition or with a special diet, but ultimately it'll be okay if we don't. So pull out the ones that are the most important. Look at how do those diseases you're left with, what are the goals, and are those goals pretty easy to manage together, or do they have a lot of opposing issues? And if they have a lot of opposing issues, you might have to split the difference on some of those, or that might be where you pull in a referral to a nutritionist as well. And then ultimately, you're going to try to choose the diet that best balances those nutritional profiles of your high priority diseases. And so you may want to use those model diets from the product guide to kind of let you know, well, for this disease, if this is the model diet for that, what are the nutrient levels that I care about? What are the other diseases